Riley Martinez wiped down the counter at Galaxy Grounds for the sixth time that hour. The cafe's main rush had ended 30 minutes ago, but she kept finding new specks of spilled sugar crystals and droplets of spilled coffee. Better to clean than to think. Better to focus on wiping down surfaces than to notice the subtle tremors running through Delta 7's superstructure. The kind that came from ships docking improperly, or, worse, weapons fire. She glanced at the view screen above the coffee station. Just a standard newscast, showing commerce numbers from the outer rim. No alerts, no warnings. The tremor was probably nothing. "Blep, did you recalibrate the espresso machine?" she called over her shoulder to her assistant barista. The Zorgonian unfurled two of his forearms from behind the pastry case. "Yes, Commander. I mean, Riley." His purple facial tentacles twitched in embarrassment. "Sorry, it still slips out sometimes." Riley forced a smile. No harm done. After 8 years, she'd grown accustomed to the occasional slip. Delta 7 was home to over 40,000 beings from across the galaxy. But word had spread quickly when she'd first arrived. Former Commander Riley Martinez, decorated pilot of the Human Defense Corps, hero of the Battle of Proxima Centauri, savior of the Outer Rim, now serving lattes and scones at a space station cafe. The first year had been the hardest. Veterans stopping by just to shake her hand. Young pilots asking for tactical advice while she steamed milk. Journalists trying to sneak interviews disguised as casual conversations about coffee beans. Eventually, the novelty wore off. Now only the station's older residents, like Blep, occasionally remembered who she had been. The station trembled again, harder this time. Several customers glanced up from their drinks, expressions ranging from mild concern to outright alarm. Mrs. Krell, a Centaurian elder who came in every day for her special blend of Andromeda tea, caught Riley's eye. "Just the docking clamps." "Dear Mrs. Krell said, though her lower set of eyes darted nervously toward the view screen. "Nothing to worry about." "Of course," Riley agreed, though her hand unconsciously moved to her hip, where a blaster would have been 8 years ago. Now, there was only an apron pocket full of stirring sticks. The overhead lights flickered, not a good sign. A third tremor shook the station, violent enough to rattle the cups in their holders and send a tower of stacked saucers crashing to the floor. Riley was moving before the ceramic shards settled, vaulting over the counter and heading for the entrance. The station's emergency system was oddly silent. No alarms, no automated warnings. She reached the cafe's entrance just as the first explosion hit. The corridor outside blazed with sudden light, and the pressure wave sent her stumbling backward. Emergency blast doors slammed down across the entrance, sealing the cafe off from the corridor. "Everyone away from the windows!" Riley shouted, her command voice returning instantly. "Move to the back room!" The customers obeyed without question, scrambling toward the kitchen area. Only Mrs. Krell remained seated, all 4 of her hands wrapped around her teacup. "It's happening again, isn't it?" the old Centaurian asked quietly. Before Riley could answer, the view screen above the counter flickered and changed. The commerce reports vanished, replaced by the stark image of 3 massive ships moving into position around Delta 7. The ships were angular, gleaming black, bristling with weapon ports. Vex dreadnoughts. 3 of them. "Oh no," Blep whispered, his voice rising to a squeak. "The Vex? But the war is over. We signed peace accords." "Peace accords mean nothing to the Vex," Riley said grimly. "They were AI-controlled ships, created for warfare, programmed with one directive: expansion. The accords had merely redirected them temporarily." The cafe door's emergency override kicked in with a hydraulic hiss. The blast door retracted halfway, then jammed. Through the gap stepped Commander Voss, the station's military chief. Her uniform was singed, and a trickle of blue blood ran from her temple down her scaled face. "Commander Martinez," Voss said, her lizard-like eyes fixing on Riley. "Thank the stars. We need you." Riley felt the room spin slightly. Everyone was staring at her now. "I'm not a commander anymore. I'm a barista." Voss's expression hardened. "I've accessed your military file. 8 years ago, you single-handedly destroyed a Vex cruiser squadron during the Battle of Proxima Centauri. You're the only person on this station who successfully engaged Vex vessels and survived." "That was a long time ago," Riley said. The memories she'd spent years suppressing came flooding back. The screaming of her targeting system, the flash of explosions, the silence that followed as she drifted alone in space, the sole survivor of her squadron. Another explosion rocked the station. This time, the lights went out completely, replaced seconds later by the dim, red glow of emergency lighting. Over the cafe's speaker system, a calm, automated voice announced, "Attention all personnel. Defensive protocols engaged. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." "Our defense pilots are already launching," Voss said. "But they're inexperienced. The Vex will cut through them like paper. We need someone who knows Vex tactics." Riley shook her head. "I haven't flown combat in 8 years. I'm not that person anymore." 8,000 civilians on this station say differently," Voss countered, "including everyone in this room." Riley looked around. Blep's tentacles were quivering in fear. Mrs. Krell sat stoically, but the tremble in her lower hands betrayed her anxiety. The other customers, families, workers, ordinary people, huddled in the back room, watching her with desperate hope. "I came here to forget," Riley said quietly. "And now we need you to remember," Voss replied. The station rocked with another hit. The espresso machine toppled from its counter with a crash, spraying hot water across the floor. The automated voice returned, less calm this time. "Alert. Hull breach detected in sections 17 through 22. Emergency containment active." Riley closed her eyes briefly. The cafe suddenly felt very small, very fragile, just like her fighter had felt 8 years ago, facing down an enemy that didn't feel fear, didn't feel mercy. "One last mission," she said finally, opening her eyes. "But I choose my ship, and I choose my weapons officer." Relief flooded Voss's reptilian features. "Whatever you need, just hurry." As they rushed from the cafe, Riley heard Mrs. Krell call after her. "The good bean blend was always my favorite. Dear, I'll be expecting a fresh cup when you get back." Riley managed a tight smile over her shoulder. "I'll put it on your tab." The corridor outside was chaos. Emergency crews rushed past, carrying wounded station personnel. Civilians pressed against the walls, trying to stay out of the way. The overhead speakers blared contradictory instructions. "Proceed to evacuation points," followed immediately by, "Remain in your quarters until further notice." Voss led her through a service tunnel, bypassing the worst of the crowds. "The main hangar was hit in the first salvo," she explained. "We've moved all operational craft to the auxiliary bays." "How many fighters do we have?" Riley asked, automatically assessing resources, just as she'd been trained. 7 shuttles with retrofitted defense systems. 2 actual fighters. Old HDC Wasp class that were being transported for a museum exhibition. And a handful of civilian craft that might be combat-capable with some quick modifications. "Not enough," Riley muttered. "Not nearly enough against 3 Vex dreadnoughts." They emerged into a smaller hangar bay, where frantic activity was underway. Mechanics swarmed over the available craft, while pilots received hurried briefings from station officers. Riley scanned the bay, her experienced eye quickly assessing each vessel. The shuttles were too slow. The Wasp fighters were museum pieces for a reason. Outdated targeting systems, weak shields. Her gaze finally settled on an unusual ship in the far corner. "What is that?" she asked, pointing. Voss followed her gaze and grimaced. "That's the Cosmic Disaster. Smuggler's vessel we impounded last month. Fast, but unstable. The owner made so many modifications we can't even identify the original model." "That's my ship," Riley decided immediately. You can't be serious, Voss protested. It's practically held together with duct tape and prayers. Exactly. The Vex AIs are programmed to recognize and counter standard military vessels. They won't know what to make of whatever that is. Voss looked skeptical but nodded. And your weapons officer? Riley surveyed the personnel in the hangar. Her eyes landed on a young Flarian, standing nervously by one of the shuttles, checking and rechecking a weapons console. The Flarian's skin glowed faintly orange with anxiety, but her six-fingered hands moved with confident precision over the controls. Her, Riley said. What's her name? Pip, Voss answered. Graduated top of her class at the Academy for Weapons Systems, but she's never seen actual combat. Perfect, Riley said. The Vex AIs have compiled data on every veteran weapons officer in the sector. They'll have analyzed and developed countermeasures for standard firing patterns. We need someone unpredictable. She's a rookie, Voss warned. She's exactly what we need, Riley insisted, already striding toward the young Florian. Pip, she called. The Florian jumped, her skin flaring briefly brighter with surprise. Yes, Commander, she stammered as Riley approached. I'm not a commander anymore, Riley said automatically. I need a weapons officer. Interested? Pip's eyes widened. You're Riley Martinez. The Riley Martinez? The Proxima Centauri Riley Martinez? Riley suppressed a sigh. Currently, the Galaxy Grounds Riley Martinez. But yes, and we don't have time for introductions. Are you in or out? Pip's skin glowed even brighter with excitement. In! Definitely in! I've studied all your tactics at the Academy. The Martinez maneuver is legendary. I wrote my thesis on your engagement patterns during the— Save it, Riley cut her off. We're taking that ship. She pointed to the cosmic disaster. Grab whatever you need and meet me there in 2 minutes. As Pip rushed off to collect her gear, Voss handed Riley a small data chip. Your military credentials, reactivated. Full commander status and authorization codes. Riley stared at the chip for a moment, before slipping it into her pocket. If we survive this, I'm going back to making coffee. If we survive this, I'll personally ensure you never have to fly again, Voss promised. Unless you want to. Riley headed for the cosmic disaster, dodging rushing crews and emergency equipment. The ship looked even worse up close. Its hull was a patchwork of different materials, some sections gleaming like new, others corroded and dull. The cockpit was disproportionately large compared to the main body, giving the craft a top-heavy appearance. Pip arrived, carrying a small duffel bag and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. I brought some custom targeting algorithms I've been developing, she said breathlessly. They're unorthodox, but— Unorthodox is good, Riley interrupted, palming the entry pad. The ship's door slid open with a concerning groan of metal. The Vex expect orthodox. They entered the ship, and Riley's heart sank further. The interior was as chaotic as the exterior. The cockpit contained 3 mismatched seats, control panels with labels in at least 4 different languages, and a disturbing number of warning lights already blinking before they'd even powered up. What do you think? Pip asked, settling into the weapons station and beginning to familiarize herself with the controls. I think, Riley said, sliding into the pilot's seat, that if we survive, it will be a miracle. She tapped the main console, and to her surprise, it responded immediately, coming to life with a cheerful series of beeps. A holographic display appeared, showing not mission parameters or system status, but a recipe for pasta salad. Is that food instructions? Pip asked, leaning over to look. The previous owner had interesting priorities, Riley muttered, swiping the recipe aside. She found the proper navigation controls buried under 3 menus of what appeared to be music playlists. The ship's actual system status finally appeared on a secondary screen. Shields at 62%, weapons at 89%, engines. The readout flickered between 45% and 120%, which couldn't possibly be right. "Commander," Pip's voice had lost some of its excitement. "There's something strange about the weapon systems." Riley glanced over. "Strange how?" "Well," Pip said slowly, "according to this, our main armament includes standard laser cannons, 2 missile launchers, and a disco ball." "A what?" Pip pointed to the weapons inventory displayed on her console. Listed between proton torpedoes and rear deflector array was indeed retractable disco ball with synchronized light show. The smuggler must have used it as a distraction tactic, Riley guessed. Unexpected light patterns to confuse pursuit vessels. It was exactly the kind of unorthodox approach that might work against the Vex. The hangar's warning klaxons began to sound. Over the station's comm system, an urgent voice announced, "All defense craft, launch immediately. Vex boarding pods detected approaching sections 12 through 15. "Boarding pods?" Pip's skin paled to a muted orange. "They're going to take the station." "Not if we can help it," Riley said, strapping herself in. She accessed the comm system. "Control. This is Martinez. Cosmic disaster requesting immediate launch clearance." "Clearance granted," came Voss's voice. "Hangar doors opening now. Martinez. Good hunting." The massive doors at the end of the hangar began to slide apart, revealing the blackness of space beyond, punctuated by the flashes of weapons fire. Riley could see several station defense shuttles already engaged with smaller Vex vessels. In the distance loomed the massive silhouettes of the 3 dreadnoughts. "Hold on," Riley told Pip as she fired up the engines. The entire ship shuddered alarmingly, and several new warning lights appeared on the console. Riley ignored them. No time for diagnostics now. She eased the throttle forward, and the cosmic disaster lurched out of its docking clamps. The controls were sensitive, too sensitive. The ship tilted dramatically before Riley compensated, nearly scraping the hangar wall. "Sorry," she muttered. "Been a while." Pip said nothing. Her attention fixed on her weapons console, fingers flying over the controls as she familiarized herself with the systems. Her skin had deepened to a concentrated amber, her species equivalent of intense focus. They cleared the hangar, and Riley immediately had to bank hard to avoid debris from a destroyed shuttle. The cosmic disaster responded better than expected, twisting through the wreckage with surprising agility. Beyond the immediate battle zone, Riley could see escape pods launching from the station, streaking away toward the relative safety of the system's outer planets. "Commander," Pip said tensely, "I'm tracking 12 Vex fighters heading for the evacuation routes. The escape pods are unarmed." Riley swallowed hard. 12 fighters, 3 dreadnoughts, 2 of them in the cosmic disaster. The math wasn't encouraging. "We need to draw their attention," she decided. "Get them to focus on us instead of the civilians." "How do we do that?" Pip asked. Riley's hands tightened on the controls. "We make ourselves the biggest threat in the sector." She opened a general broadcast channel. "This is Commander Riley Martinez of the Human Defense Corps, pilot of the Cosmic Disaster. All station defense craft, fall back to defensive positions around the evacuation routes. I repeat, protect the civilian pods. The dreadnoughts are mine." There was a moment of stunned silence on the comm, then a chorus of acknowledgments. The station's defense craft began to regroup, moving to form a protective screen around the streams of escape pods. "They're retreating," Pip observed, watching the tactical display. "But how are we supposed to take on 3 dreadnoughts by ourselves?" "We're not," Riley said. "Not directly. The Vex operate on predictive algorithms. They analyze known tactics and develop countermeasures. But their weakness is their programming rigidity. They can't adapt quickly to truly unexpected behavior." She pushed the throttle forward, and the cosmic disaster surged ahead, racing toward the nearest dreadnought. The massive black ship loomed larger on their view screen, its weapon ports beginning to glow as they tracked the approaching vessel. "And our behavior is going to be very unexpected," Riley added. a grim smile touching her lips. "Pip, remember that disco ball you mentioned? Get ready to deploy it on my mark." Pip stared at her for a moment. Then her face split into a wide grin, her skin glowing bright orange with excitement. "Yes, Commander!" Riley threw the ship into a series of evasive maneuvers as the first volley of fire from the dreadnought lanced toward them. The cosmic disaster shuddered and spun, but somehow stayed intact. The patchwork shields were holding better than expected. "Approaching optimal firing range," Pip reported, her voice steady despite the violent maneuvering. "Prepare main weapons," Riley ordered, banking hard to avoid another barrage. "And disco ball." Pip's fingers danced across her console. "Ready!" They were close enough now to see individual details on the dreadnought's hull. Weapon emplacements, sensor arrays, the massive engines glowing ominously at the rear. "Now!" Riley shouted, throwing the cosmic disaster into a tight spiral, directly toward the dreadnought's main sensor array. Pip fired everything at once. Laser cannons blazed, missiles streaked away, and from a previously hidden compartment on the underside of their ship, a large mirrored sphere extended. The moment it deployed, it began to spin, and dozens of multicolored lights activated around it, sending dazzling patterns cascading across the black hull of the dreadnought. The effect was immediate and bizarre. The dreadnought's point defense systems started firing wildly, targeting the reflected light patterns instead of the actual ship. Several of its tracking beams lost lock, sweeping randomly across space. "It's working!" Pip exclaimed. "Their targeting systems are confused by the light patterns." Riley didn't waste the advantage. She drove the cosmic disaster in a screaming dive along the dreadnought's hull, so close that the ship's shields scraped against the larger vessel's armor plating, sending showers of sparks into space. Their own weapons continued firing, targeting vulnerable spots that Riley remembered from her combat days. Junction points, secondary sensor arrays, external cooling systems. "Pull the disco ball in and hold on," Riley called, as they approached the massive engine section. She cut the main thrusters and fired the maneuvering jets in a precise sequence, sending the cosmic disaster into a controlled tumble that brought their main weapons to bear on the dreadnought's engine exhaust ports. "Firing!" Pip responded instantly, launching their remaining missiles directly into the glowing ports. Riley slammed the thrusters back to full power the instant the missiles launched, propelling them away from the dreadnought. Behind them, the missiles found their targets, detonating in sequence inside the engine system. The dreadnought's rear section erupted in a series of explosions that traveled up the length of the ship like a chain reaction. "Yes!" Pip's skin was glowing almost white with excitement. "Direct hit!" But Riley was already focusing on their next target. The second dreadnought was turning to bring its main weapons to bear, having recognized them as a legitimate threat. The third hung back, still bombarding the station but adjusting its position for a better firing solution on the cosmic disaster. "They're adapting," Riley warned. "The disco ball won't work again. They'll have adjusted their sensors." "What's the plan?" Pip asked, already reloading the missile launchers with their limited remaining ordnance. Riley's mind raced. The second dreadnought was now directly between them and the station. If they could somehow use that positioning... "We're going to thread the needle," she decided. "Full power to forward shields. Divert all non-essential power to engines." "Threaded what needle?" Pip asked, frantically adjusting power settings. "The one we're about to make," Riley replied, pushing the cosmic disaster to full acceleration directly toward the second dreadnought. "Prepare to fire all remaining weapons on my mark, targeting their bridge section." The dreadnought grew rapidly in their view screen, its weapons already firing. Several shots glanced off their reinforced forward shields, but the cosmic disaster held together, racing toward the seemingly solid wall of the enemy vessel. "Commander," Pip's voice was tense but trusting. "I don't see a way through." "There isn't one yet," Riley said calmly, her hands steady on the controls. The distance closed rapidly. 5,000 meters. 3,000. 1,000. "Fire!" Pip unleashed everything they had left. Lasers, missiles, even a spread of mining charges they'd discovered in a secondary weapons bay. The combined barrage slammed into the dreadnought's command tower, creating a series of explosions that rippled across its surface. But Riley wasn't aiming to destroy it. Not yet. As sections of hull plating tore away from the impact zone, she spotted what she was looking for, a momentary rupture that exposed an internal maintenance shaft. "Hold on!" she shouted, and drove the cosmic disaster straight toward the gap. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed they wouldn't fit, that they'd crash directly into the dreadnought's structure. The ship's hull screamed in protest as it scraped against the edges of the breach, warning lights flooding the cockpit. Then, they were inside the dreadnought, flying through a maintenance tunnel never designed to accommodate a ship of their size. Emergency bulkheads began slamming shut ahead of them, but too slowly. Riley threaded the cosmic disaster through the narrowing gaps with millimeters to spare, trailing sparks and fragments of their own hull. "What are we doing?" Pip yelled over the screeching of metal. "Creating chaos," Riley called back. The tunnel opened into a massive internal hangar bay, filled with inactive Vex fighters. "Target those fuel cells!" She pointed to a cluster of glowing containers along one wall. Pip needed no further instruction. She fired their last remaining missile, striking the fuel depot dead center. The explosion was immediate and catastrophic, setting off a chain reaction that engulfed the hangar. Riley was already turning the ship, finding another maintenance shaft that led toward the opposite side of the dreadnought. "Their internal systems are going haywire," Pip reported, watching her tactical display. "Fire suppression, atmosphere containment, power distribution. Everything's shutting down or misfiring." "The Vex systems aren't designed to handle internal threats," Riley explained as she navigated the narrowing tunnel. "Their defenses are all externally focused." They burst out through another hull breach on the far side of the dreadnought, trailing debris and atmosphere that vented into space behind them. The massive ship was now listing to one side, internal explosions visible through gaps in its armor. "Two down," Riley said grimly, turning their damaged vessel toward the third dreadnought. "One to go." But the third dreadnought was already retreating, pulling away from the station, its smaller support craft abandoning their attack runs to form a protective screen around it. "They're running?" Pip sounded disbelieving. "They're reevaluating," Riley corrected. "The Vex operate on calculated risk. We just changed their probability matrices." She opened the comm channel again. "Station Delta 7. This is the cosmic disaster. 2 dreadnoughts neutralized. The third is retreating. What's your status?" Voss's voice came back, tense but controlled. "We've contained most of the damage. Martinez. Boarding parties were repelled. Evacuation is 60% complete. The remaining civilians are being moved to secure areas." "Any pursuit craft still operational?" Riley asked, eyeing the retreating dreadnought. "They could end this now. Make sure the Vex didn't return with reinforcements." "Negative," Voss replied. "All our defense craft took heavy damage. Return to the station, Commander. That's an order." Riley hesitated, her hand hovering over the throttle. She could still catch the dreadnought, finish what she'd started, complete the mission. But then she looked at their ship status. Shields below 20%. Weapons depleted. Hull integrity compromised in multiple sections. And beside her, Pip, young, brilliant Pip, with her whole career ahead of her, watching expectantly. "Acknowledged," Riley said finally. "Returning to station." The tension visibly drained from Pip's posture, her skin fading to a relieved pale orange. "We did it," she said quietly. "We actually did it." Riley allowed herself a small smile. "We did. You're a natural, Pip." "Me?" Pip's skin flushed darker with embarrassment. "I just followed your lead. You're exactly like the story said, brilliant, fearless." "Not fearless," Riley corrected, turning the battered cosmic disaster back toward Delta 7. "Just experienced enough to work through the fear." She surveyed the damage to the station as they approached. Several sections were clearly breached. Emergency fields containing the atmosphere. Debris floated in slow orbits, but the main structure held, and lights still shone from most of the habitat rings. "Will you go back to the cafe now?" Pip asked, as they received docking instructions. Riley considered the question. 8 years of hiding, of pretending to be something less than she was. 8 years of running from memories instead of making peace with them. "I think," she said slowly, "I can serve coffee and teach a few flight classes. The station could use better pilots." Pip's face lit up, her skin glowing bright gold. "You'd teach? Really?" "Someone has to show the next generation how to improvise," Riley said with a wry smile. "Orthodox tactics only get you so far against an enemy like the Vex." They docked in the auxiliary hangar, the cosmic disaster settling onto the landing pad with concerning creaks and groans. As the engines powered down, several systems gave out completely, plunging parts of the cockpit into darkness. "Perfect timing," Riley remarked, unfastening her safety harness. "Another minute and we might have been floating home." The hangar was crowded when they disembarked. Medical teams treating the wounded, mechanics assessing damaged vessels, station security coordinating defense efforts. But a path cleared for Riley and Pip as they descended the cosmic disaster's ramp. Commander Voss waited at the bottom, her scaled face set in an expression that might have been a smile. "Commander Martinez," she said formally, "the station owes you a debt that can't be repaid." Riley shook her head. "I'm still just Riley, the coffee maker. And it wasn't just me." She nodded toward Pip. "Officer Pip here has potential that the Academy should be developing." Voss turned to the young Florian, who stood at attention, her skin cycling through shades of orange with nervousness and pride. "A commendation will be entered in your record, officer, and I believe you'll find your instruction schedule adjusted to include advanced tactical training." "Thank you, Commander," Pip said, her voice steady despite her glowing skin. A commotion at the hangar entrance drew their attention. A group of civilians pushed their way through the security cordon, led by a familiar purple figure with 4 waving arms. "Riley!" Blep called, rushing forward. "You're alive! You're actually alive!" Behind him came Mrs. Krell, moving more sedately on her 4 legs, and a crowd of what appeared to be every regular customer from Galaxy grounds. "The cafe," Riley said suddenly, remembering. "Is it?" "Structurally intact," Mrs. Krell assured her, coming to a stop beside Blep. "Though I believe your espresso machine suffered a heroic demise." "We can get another one," Blep said dismissively. "You saved the station. You saved all of us." The crowd murmured agreement, several people breaking into spontaneous applause. Riley felt her face flush with embarrassment. This was exactly what she'd been avoiding for 8 years. The attention, the recognition, the expectations. "I just did what needed doing," she said uncomfortably. "Anyone would have—" "But anyone didn't," Voss pointed out quietly. "You did." Riley looked around at the faces watching her. Voss's professional respect, Pip's hero worship, Blep's relieved joy, Mrs. Krell's quiet pride, and the grateful expressions of dozens of civilians whose names she'd never know. For 8 years, she'd been running from this moment, from being needed, from being seen. "The good bean blend," she said finally, turning to Mrs. Krell. "You said it was your favorite. I should have a fresh batch ready by tomorrow morning, assuming we can salvage the grinder." The old Centaurian's 4 eyes crinkled with understanding. "I shall look forward to it, dear. Perhaps with a side of your tactical insights. My granddaughter has been considering the Academy." And just like that, a weight Riley had carried for 8 years began to lift. Not gone entirely, but lighter, manageable. "First cups on the house," she agreed. 3 days later, the line for Galaxy grounds stretched down the corridor and around the corner. The cafe had reopened with a salvaged espresso machine, hastily repaired furnishings, and a new sign over the counter that read, "Coffee in Combat." lessons in both. Riley moved between the counter and the tables, pouring refills and answering questions. At one table, a group of young pilot cadets leaned forward intently as she explained the finer points of unpredictable maneuvering patterns. At another, Pip sat with several of her academy classmates, recounting their battle with animated gestures that sent her skin cycling through brilliant oranges and golds. "The key is improvisation," Riley told the cadets, sketching a flight path on a napkin. "The Vex expect you to follow protocol. Don't." "But the manual says," one cadet began. "The manual was written by people who survived," Riley interrupted gently. "Which means they encountered enemies who had already studied the manual. Write your own." Blep approached, all four arms laden with fresh cups. "More cadets at the door," he reported cheerfully. "And Commander Voss wants to know if you'll consult on the station's new defense protocols tomorrow." "After the morning rush," Riley agreed, taking some of the cups to distribute. "We have priorities." As she moved through the crowded cafe, Riley caught sight of Mrs. Krell in her usual corner, sipping her good bean blend and watching the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. The old Centaurian raised her cup in a small salute when their eyes met. Riley returned the gesture with a genuine smile. For 8 years, she'd hidden who she was, buried her past under coffee grounds and customer service. Now, somehow, she'd found a way to be both, the barista and the commander, the civilian and the veteran, the person who made the perfect latte and the one who could save a station when needed. "More coffee, Commander?" Blep asked, appearing at her elbow with a fresh pot. "Just Riley is fine," she corrected automatically, then paused. "Actually, either works." She took the coffee pot and moved to the next table of eager cadets, ready to pour and teach, to share what she knew, to stop hiding. The station trembled slightly, just normal operations this time, and Riley Martinez, senior interstellar beverage specialist and part-time flight instructor, steadied the pot without spilling a drop.